So welcome everyone to this online session. Whether you are watching this live or listening to the recording, thank you for tuning in. So today's session is all about how you can use NVivo software to read and take notes. I do also do some other sessions that look at NVivo to that kind of more focus on analysing qualitative or materials for qualitative research projects, and also using NVivo literature reviews. So if you are interested in those things, you might want to come along to those workshops as well. There is a little bit of overlap, but today is more just about, for whatever purpose, if you're reading some materials and you want to take some notes, what are the options and the ways that you can use NVivo to help you with that. So I'll talk a little bit about coding as part of that, because personally I find that a really great way to organize my materials in order to synthesize data from lots of different sources. Anyway, before I do go any further, I'd like to acknowledge that I'm coming to you from the beautiful area of Boorloo, which is Perth, and I acknowledge and pay respects to the Whadjuk Noongar people as the owners and custodians of these lands, and I thank Whadjuk Noongar people for their continuing care of country for so many thousands of years. So, like I said, today we'll look at how you can use NVivo software to take notes and organize your ideas and concepts when you are reading different kind of materials. So in order to do this, the key things that I'll cover today is how can you import materials into NVivo. So I'll focus on PDFs, but if anyone has any other things that they would like to import, please do let me know and I can explain that. I'll look at how you can create annotations for those PDFs and also write memos, which is like related documents where you can take notes about your PDFs or any other project materials. And like I said, I'll also look at how you can code the different materials and why you might do that kind of thing to help you organize your ideas. So all of the content that I covered today, plus additional content, is available on our Uniskills website. So I will pop the link for that in the chat, in case anyone's interested in checking that out. So obviously once you do get access to NVivo, if you decide you'd like to do that, you can then have a look at the online guide with the step-by-step instructions of how to use it. You can of course come to another NVivo workshop down the track if you like, or you can also email me at the library if you have any particular questions. So I'll put in the chat the best email for me. So what I'll do now also is I'll just show you what that Uniskills site looks like, and as part of that I'll show you the instructions for how you can get access to NVivo. So this is what the page looks like that I sent the link for. On the introduction page here, it explains the various options for getting access to it. So luckily for you, regardless of if you are a staff member or a student, and I'm assuming most of you, if not all of you, are probably students, you can get access to NVivo for free on your personal computer. You can also use it on all of the computers at Curtin, at least on any Australian Curtin campuses. So for example, if you do have access to the Bentley campus, if you come to the library, or if you come to any of the Abacus labs or any of the other computer labs around campus, they should all have NVivo installed. So you could always have a little try on there first if you like. And then if you do decide you'd like to download it onto your personal computer, it's just a matter of getting in contact with the IT people at Curtin. So they're called DTS, to assist you with the download. So I've put some instructions here. Basically, if you're a student, you can go to the Support You self-service portal, which you can find in Oasis. So it should be, I forget the name of the tab in Oasis. I think it's either the second or third tab along when you're in your Oasis homepage. And on the right, it has a list of shortcuts, and one of them says Support You. So if you go there, you can search for Request Home Use Software, and then access that search result, and that will have a form for you to fill out. You just say that you'd like to download NVivo, and then there'll be some instructions on how to do that. So there is a link to download it, which you can do yourself, but then it requires an access key to activate the license. So that's where you need to give the IT people a call, and they will tell you that access key. Or actually, they'll type it in for you. So that's all done through the IT people rather than through the library. But if you do have any problems, again, you're welcome to email me and I can help you with that. At this stage, does anyone have any questions about getting access to NVivo or anything like that? Cool. Okay. All right. So what I'll do now then for the rest of the session is basically demonstrate some of the key features that I think would be most helpful to you if you are wanting to use NVivo for reading and taking notes for any purpose. So if you just need to bear with me for a sec while I sort out my different screens and what I'm sharing. Okay, so hopefully you can all just see my desktop. So what I'm going to do now is open up the NVivo software. So I'll just search for it. So the latest version is NVivo 15. So if you downloaded it now, then that would be the version you're getting. If you do have a previous version, they're all quite similar. There's not been huge changes in the most recent versions. So this is what it looks like when you first log into it. One of the nice things about it is it comes with a few different sample projects, and these are a really great way to kind of get to grips with the software and see the kind of things that you can do. So for today, I'm actually going to demonstrate using one of the sample projects. You can see there's a couple here, and then there is also additional ones as well. For example, there is a sample project that really focuses on literature reviews. So if you are needing to do a literature review, there is a project that would be helpful for you for that, just kind of giving you ideas. And that's the one I'll use when I do another workshop in a couple of weeks' time, which looks at specifically literature reviews. But for today, I'm just going to go with the generic original sample project. So when you first open it, it'll prompt you if you want to start a tour. This will kind of take you through some of the key features of the software. These are the features, or some of these features are the things that I'm going to cover today. So no need to look at the tour now, so I'll skip the tour, but if you decide you would like to look at that later, you can always go to File and Help. And you'll see here there's a link where you can look at that tour again, or there is a link to some online help, there's some tutorials, or you can get in contact with the NVivo support. So in addition to having the option to contact the library, you can also access some of these if you'd like to, I guess, access some self-help support. Okay, so this is what it looks like when you first open it. You can see we've got this menu on the left here. This is what we'll call the navigation menu with like the different sections of your NVivo. So if I just collapse these a little bit, you'll see it's organized into these three main sections. So we've got import, organize, and explore. So import is where you import your data and you put them in the data section in one of these places. And I'll talk a little bit more about that shortly. Organize is where you can do all kinds of things with your data. So there's lots that you can do, but the main things you will do is the coding and the note taking, which is what I'll cover today. And then you can also explore your materials in different ways. So for example, there's lots of ways that you can search your project materials. Again, I won't cover that today, but that's covered in another session. So there's lots of options for that as well. Going back to the data section, so you'll see when I select files, there is one project material in the files folder here already, and this is an overview of the sample project. So essentially this is like a Word document that has either been uploaded to this project or has been created from scratch in the project, which provides an overview of the project. So obviously with yourself, if you're just using NVivo to read and take notes, you don't need to write an overview of your project. But if you were doing a larger qualitative project, it might be a good idea if you wanted to include some kind of an overview. And for the sample project, it's helpful because it just gives you an idea of what the project is all about. So if you are interested, you can double click on that. So that here is what we call the list view, where it lists the content of the folder. And then when you double click that, the actual material opens up on the right-hand side. You can read all about the sample project. So that's one example of a material that has been added into the files section. If you are doing a smaller project, so maybe you've just got half a dozen articles that you'd like to read and summarize, you can just upload all of your articles directly here into files. If you start to get a bit more complicated with lots of different project materials and different kinds of materials and things like that, you might find that you want to organize them into folders. So you can see in the sample project, they've got about half a dozen different folders where they've organized all of their different materials. And this is because this is a really large project, or reasonably large project, with different kinds of research materials. But as an example, just to show you how you can upload some PDFs to your project, for example, if I was to put those in a folder, I would right-click on Files and say that I want to create a new folder. You can call your folders, obviously, whatever you like, according to how you'd like to organize your materials. But for example, if I just call mine PDFs and say OK, then I've got a new folder ready to put those PDFs in. So that's mainly what you would do in terms of importing your data. And in a moment, I'll show you how we can actually add some PDFs to here. But before I do that, I'll just mention the other two sections that you can find under data. You're probably not going to use these if you are just like reading and taking notes, but I'll just mention them briefly so you just have an idea. Basically, file classifications is the section where you can classify your files, essentially. So like provide information about the different files. So for example, if you do have any reference materials, you might want to provide information about like the author and the year and the title and so on. So, you could add that information for journal articles if you like, but you probably don't have to because, unless you're actually going to use that information, it's no point really putting it in there. The reason you might use it maybe is if like you were wanting to do a search or something like that, and you wanted to restrict your search maybe to articles from a particular year or from a particular author or something like that. But again, that's getting more complicated with a bigger project. Similarly, like if you were going down the track of having interviews, it could be handy to have this kind of information about the different interviews, but definitely not a necessity. NVivo can work with EndNote or any other referencing software. So if anyone does use that, then you can import things directly from EndNote. If you were to do that, then it would automatically create this kind of reference information. But again, you don't actually have to use it. It can just sit there in the background. And then the other section is externals. So this would just be if you had something that you couldn't actually upload, maybe because it was like actually a physical book that you read. You could just write your own notes and put them in the externals folder instead. But I would suggest, if your project is just relatively small and you're looking at reading and taking notes from different sources, there's no issue with just putting that information in the files folder instead. So I would encourage you, especially when you're getting started, don't worry about file classifications and externals, just put all your materials in files. So I hope that makes sense and hasn't confused things. In terms of how you would actually add your files to your project, for example, you would open the folder where you want them to go, or if you just want them to go directly in files, you would just select files. I'm going to put them in PDFs, so I'll select PDFs. And then I would right-click and make my selection. I should mention that all of the things that I'm doing today, you can also use the top menu instead as well if you like. So for example, you could go import and files to do this. I just tend to use right-clicking instead, but that's obviously a personal preference. So I would right click if it's just a PDF or a Word document or an image or an audio file or a video file, if you did have that kind of materials, anything like that that is saved on your computer, all of that you would just need to go import items. It would only be if you had some kind of survey data, like saved in an Excel file or on Qualtrics or something like that, that you would go import survey and import from if you wanted to import from somewhere else like referencing software. But today I'm just going to keep it simple and I'm just going to go import items. If anyone who does have access to NVivo is following along, if you want to just experiment with uploading anything that you've got on your computer, you can absolutely do that. So here I've just got some examples of some PDFs that I've been looking at. So I'm just going to select a few of those just for demonstration purposes and import. And you'll see now they get added to my project. They'll just be named according to whatever you had them named where you saved them, but you can change any of the settings like the name or anything else in NVivo by just right clicking and going to PDF properties and changing the name. And while you're at it, if you'd like to give a description to any of your files, you can do that. You don't have to. I also like to color code things. So for example, sometimes when I import new things, I give them a color red. And then when I finish reading them, I give them a different color just as a little indication to myself. So you can do that if you like, but you don't have to. So I see interested in importing books from my Kindle where I've made notes. Okay, that's a great question. I'm not sure about, I'm actually not familiar with using Kindles myself. I'm not sure how you would go about doing that. Like, I don't think that there's a direct way to import it. It's certainly not listed as an import from. So I guess it would depend like what kind of file it was. Oops, as to how you could go about importing it. Yeah, have a go and let me know if you need help. It's, yeah, not something I'm familiar with, but I'm really happy to have a look, investigate with you if you like. Because, yeah, if you've already made the notes somewhere else, obviously you don't want to have to make them again. So that's a great question. Any other questions about the process of importing things to your project in terms of like, how would you do that, or why would you do that, or anything, any questions about NVivo so far? Okay. So I guess I should just make clear at this point that like what I'm creating now is my NVivo project, and I would just save that as an NVivo file, which is called like .nvp. So it just works the same as any other file. Like, you know, if you saved a Word document and you saved it to some kind of cloud location, then you could access it from anywhere else. And the same goes with your NVivo project. The only caveat would be you can only open it on a computer that has the NVivo software. So this thing here that I've got is my project. Because I've worked with the sample project, it's got a bunch of materials, and I've also added some extra materials. Obviously, when you're going to use NVivo for your own project, you would go to File and New, and you would start from scratch with your project. And it'll all look the same as this, but there just wouldn't be any folders or any codes or anything like that. All right, well, what I'll do now is show you how you can do some note taking in NVivo. So for example, maybe I'll work with the PDF from the sample project in case anyone's following along and would like to use that. Oh, sure. So add from Citavi, so that is just other referencing software. So these are all different referencing software. I'm not actually familiar with Citavi myself, but for example, EndNote is the software that Curtin has a license for. So it would be if you already had an EndNote library or a Citavi library or Mendeley library, you can import all of your references directly from that. Okay, audience comments from social media platform like YouTube. That's another thing that I haven't actually done myself. So I know you can import a YouTube video. That might be something that you can do with a little add-on called nCapture. I mean, otherwise you could obviously like copy the comments into a Word document and upload that. But assuming that you have lots of comments and you don't want to have to do that, it's possible that you could use nCapture. I might just, I'll show you what that looks like. So this is a little add-on that you can add in Google Chrome. It doesn't, as far as I know, it's not accessible in other or available in other browsers. It's called nCapture. So you can see, I've got it here. So the little icon with the blue circle with the white and the orange arrow is the icon for nCapture. If you want to see if you have it, if you click on the little puzzle piece, it will show you what extensions you've got installed. So you might have it, but maybe it's not pinned. So you could just pin it like I have. Or if you don't see it there, you could go manage extensions and you could go nCapture and then turn the extension on. And the nCapture extension allows you to like capture online content. So you could capture a web page or an article, or if you were on YouTube, you could capture the video, and you might be able to capture the comments in that way. But I have not tested that. Okay. So did it save, when you tried nCapture with your YouTube, did it capture just the video but not a PDF of the comments perhaps? But yeah, that's the only thing I can think of aside from like copying the comments. Okay, and I assume there's lots of comments, so you don't want to just copy and paste them into a Word doc. Okay, yeah, that's something I'd have to play around with, sorry. So I can get back to you on that one if you'd like me to do that. I'll have a play around tomorrow. That's a great question. I haven't had that one before. Okay, any other questions? If anyone thinks of any, please do let me know. But otherwise, I'll show you with this PDF from the sample project. If I double click on that, it opens up the PDF here. If I am working with the PDF, sometimes what I like to do is just minimize the navigation window, and then you can also like make this narrower, especially if you're on a small screen, and then just zoom in just so you've got a bit more room to see what you're doing. So the two kind of main note-taking features of NVivo are the annotations and the memos. As with any kind of note-taking, like it's really up to you how you'd like to use them. But I would suggest annotations is more just like short little notes for things that maybe you want to look up, or yeah, just make a short note about rather than making more of a long note, I guess. So like something like coastal erosion, maybe I might want to add an annotation to say that I need to look up a definition of coastal erosion or something like that. So if I wanted to do that, I would just select the text, and then I would right click and say new annotation, and then I could say like need to look up definition, or need to find definition, or something like that. Or maybe it could be something along the lines of, you know, you think, oh, this reference sounds really good. You might make a little note to yourself to need to read this reference, or something like that. So just as you're going through, you can make like little notes to yourself in the same way that you would on various other software, or obviously if you were reading this, a hard copy of this, and, you know, getting out your highlighter and making your own notes. So it's that kind of thing. Once you do make the you can see I've got the annotation window open, so I can see them down the bottom here. But if you don't want that anymore, you can just untick annotations. So they are still there, you're just not seeing them. And then you can select to see them again. And for example, if you wanted to get rid of an annotation, so if I finished reading this article, then I can just right click and delete it. Does it have a text-to-speech function? So that's another great question. So I guess the short answer is no. So, text-to-speech. I was thinking speech-to-text. That's a great question. That's not something that I have looked at either. So I'm going to have to make another note to myself to look at that. So you mean like rather than reading this PDF, if you had the PDF spoken to you, I assume. Just make a note for these things. So yeah, sorry, I'm not sure about that one either, but I can look into it. Oh, cool. Yeah, fair enough. Yeah, I guess that'd be interesting to know if it did, like, and you wanted it to make an annotation, like how you would go about telling it where to make the annotation. So yeah, that's a great question and something I'll definitely look at. Oh, this thing here is just the default setting within NVivo is that rather than auto saving, it prompts you to save every 15 minutes. When you do create your own project, it'll initially ask you like what saving settings do you want to use, and you can choose to auto save instead if you prefer to do that. Okay, so that's examples of annotations. And then if you want to start making more in-depth notes, then that's when memos would definitely come in handy. So a memo is like a linked document that you can make notes in about the PDF or whatever it is that you're reading. So for example, if I wanted to make a memo for this particular PDF, so you can do it like on the PDF, you can right click and go to links, or if you're in the list view, you can also right click on the name of the PDF there. And so, well, actually, sorry, I wonder if, oh yeah, so it is the same thing. So yeah, I usually do the right clicking from the list view. I wasn't sure if I could also do it from this view, but it looks like I can. So right click, go to links, and then memo link. And then because this one doesn't already have a memo, then we would say, or maybe it does have a memo, open linked memo. So sorry, this one actually already does have a linked memo. So you can see that these are some notes that have already been created about this particular PDF. And this has happened automatically because it's the sample project. If you wanted to add to that, you would just make sure you select edit, and then you could add your own notes. And what you might like to do is like paraphrase the document as you read it. So if that's a way that you like to work, that as you read an article, you make your own notes in terms of like paraphrasing the content, then I would definitely recommend you could do that in a memo. So for example, if you are someone that likes to use the text-to-speech, you could just have the PDF open outside of NVivo and use your usual text-to-speech. And then as you're listening to it, you could be making notes in the memo in NVivo. Could be an option. And even if you're not using text-to-speech, I would generally do that anyway, is I'd have my PDF open outside of NVivo and use NVivo to make my memo, just because otherwise you're going to have to go back and forth between the two documents in NVivo, and that's a bit annoying. So if you have the PDF open separately, you can have a split screen with PDF on half and the memo on half. So yeah, this one already did have a memo that we can add to, but I'll show you if you want to make your own from scratch. For example, for one of these PDFs that I just uploaded, I could right click and go memo link and link to new memo because it doesn't already have one. When you do make a new memo from scratch, you can call it whatever you like. I would generally call it the same name as my article itself, but you don't have to do that, or you could do some shorter version of the name. And so then you've got memo, so then as you read, you can make notes about the article. Oh, and thanks for the recommendation for the text-to-speech. Cool. So yeah, it sounds like you guys know more about that than me. So Speechify, that's good to know about. But yeah, obviously that's not something in NVivo. As far as I know, there's not that functionality in NVivo, but I will have a look. Yeah, so the only options really is that you would have both tabs open. So the tab for the article and then the tab for your memo, and you'd have to go back and forth between them if you were going to be in NVivo. So that's why I was suggesting that what I would do is have this PDF just open on your computer but outside of NVivo, and then have this open here, and that way you could have, you know, if you're lucky enough to have two screens, you could have one on each screen, but if you've only got one screen, then at least you could just have half and half. Yeah, otherwise, yeah, it is very clunky to have to go back and forth. But I'd still definitely put the PDF in NVivo so that you can also do coding and annotations. It would just be when you make the memos themselves, it's easier to be able to see both at the same time. And yeah, hopefully if that was the case, you could also use your text-to-speech on your PDF in the same way that you normally would, if that would work. So that's kind of the main note-taking features. Obviously, you can do that kind of thing in a lot of other software as well. So really the main benefit that I would see to NVivo, and the thing that I really like about it, is the ability to code. And with the coding, you're not necessarily even making notes as such. You're just like organizing the existing materials in a way that then makes it a lot easier for you to summarize and synthesize those materials. Having said that, you might find that you want to code from your memos rather than directly from the articles themselves, in which case you're doing both note-taking and also coding in NVivo. And again, it's really up to you how you prefer to work. I have tried in the past making memos that I use to paraphrase the articles as I write them, and then coding from those memos. But over time, I've decided I actually prefer just coding directly from the articles. And then when I actually go to write about the articles, that's when I kind of do my synthesizing and paraphrasing at the same time. But yeah, hopefully you'll find a way that works for you if you do decide to do this. So what I'll show you now is how you'd go about doing that coding. So again, because we're in the sample project, there's already a bunch of codes, but this can be good because this can give you an idea of the kinds of different things that you might use for a code. So coding is a very personal thing. If you are doing research, you might have to follow a specific coding methodology. So maybe like you were doing thematic analysis or something like that. But if you're not doing that and you're just coding for your own purposes, then it's really up to you how you make your codes. The overall goal is that you want to organize the materials in a way that makes sense to you and is helpful to you. So that's going to be obviously different for everyone. But generally speaking, you have codes that represent different themes in your content. And if you are having an end goal of writing something, like maybe writing an essay, you might want to think about what would be the topics of your different paragraphs, and then your codes would kind of go along with each of those paragraphs. So for example, because of the nature of this project, it's all about environmental change. So the codes are different aspects of environmental change. So for example, there is a code relating to the economy and the natural environment and real estate development and so on. And a lot of these codes have subcodes and even subcodes of subcodes and so on and so on. So you can go really deep down with your subcodes and make them very small and specific. And I'd actually recommend that this is a really good thing to do, because then, for example, when you do go to write about things, it's a lot easier to do that. So, if we didn't have all of these subcodes and we just went to write about the economy, we've got 486 different bits of information about the economy. So, that's going to be really hard to synthesize all of that information. It's just way too much. So instead, if you create lots of little subcodes, then these are kind of like, you can think of it as the different sections or the paragraphs of your report or your article or essay or whatever it is that you're writing. So for example, you might have a paragraph or a section about the decline of, You might have a section about the decline of the fishing industry, and as part of that section, you might have different paragraphs on these topics. So for example, when you go to write your paragraph about the decline that's due to the cost of doing business, you've just got this small amount of information that you can use to then write that paragraph. And so this information has come from 7 different places. So the idea is that as you are reading through all of your articles, anytime you see a bit of information that relates to the decline of the fishing industry due to the cost of doing business, you would put it in this particular code. So now when you go to write about this topic, rather than having to look in 7 different places, you've just got everything stored together in the one place. And that's really like the beauty or the key feature of NVivo that I would suggest makes it, sets it apart from other software that you could do other note taking in, I guess. So just going back to the kind of codes that you might have. So like I said, a lot of them will be like different topics or themes or things that you want to write about, but you could also have some other codes as well. So for example, you might have a code where you just store any memorable quotes that you see, just so you can easily keep track of them all in one place and use them as you need them. With the sample project, they do also have a code about attitude as well, but that kind of thing would be more helpful if you were doing like a qualitative research study where you are wanting to compare like different attitudes on different topics. It would be less relevant if you were doing like a literature review or a essay or a report or something like that. In terms of how to go about doing the coding, it's just a matter of deciding like what codes do you want to have. So for example, if I wanted to make a new code, I would select the codes section and right click and say new code, and then I'd give the code a name. So for example, I will call this one, I'll call it nutrition because I'll use those nutrition-based articles that I uploaded previously. So nutrition is obviously a very broad concept, but you can start broad, and then as you start to find information, then you can find like ways that you can group it into subcodes. So maybe I'll start with nutrition. So what I would do for my coding is I would open the article that I want to code. So open this one here. Again, I would just do a bit of playing around with minimizing things. I would also make it so that I can see my codes here in the list view. And again, I would minimize the navigation view. And I'd probably zoom in on my article as well. So as I'm reading, I would code things that I think are like interesting and are going to be relevant to what I'm wanting to write about. Or, I keep saying wanting to write about because I guess I would assume that usually your end goal is to write something, but if that's kind of not the goal at the time, it would more just be things that you want to store information about, I guess. So let's just say, I'll just start from the abstract. You don't have to code the abstract, but if you wanted to, maybe let's say I wanted to code this. The way that I would do that is just select the part that I want to code, and then I would just drag and drop it to the relevant code over here. And as I read, that's the process. So it can be tempting to code like everything, but I guess you'll just end up with way too much information as you do that. So try to be a bit discerning as to what you code and what you don't. So for example, if I was interested in this topic of stunting, it would be really good for me to code this because that's defining my concept. And then once I start to code a few things, I might think, okay, hold on, like nutrition is too broad. I'm getting lots of things here. Let me rethink my code. So, for example, I might just drag this over a bit so I can see better. So I've got nutrition here, but maybe I would say, actually, I want to create a subcode of nutrition, which is about the topic of stunting in particular, because stunting is coming up quite a lot. So in order to do that, I would right-click on nutrition and say new code, and then I would call that code stunting. And then maybe even once I start coding stunting, I might find that I'm getting different things. So perhaps I might make a new code there where I have a definition. And so then what I might do is go back. Yep, great. So these are subcodes. So nutrition is my parent, and then stunting is a subcode of nutrition, and then definition is a subcode of that. So generally what you'll find is as you read more things, you'll need to rethink your coding structure a little bit. And so, for example, because I've had this bit of a rethink, what I would probably do now is just go back to my nutrition code and decide, do I want to keep the things here or do I want to move them? So for example, I would move this because it's about stunting, and I would also move this, and in fact, I'd probably move this to the definition section. And so now that I've done that, I can keep the things here as well if I like. Like there's no harm in doing that. But if you want to make this, clean this up a little bit, you can just right click and say you want to uncode it from this code. And so now the nutrition code is empty, and now the things that I previously coded there, I've put to this code and this code. And I'll just keep going like that. And you'll probably find that once you start reading your first couple of articles, you're probably having to rethink your codes quite often. But then once you start to code more, you will, you'll find you'll start to get a coding structure that works well for you. So I'll just show you now, if I open up a second PDF, then I can repeat the process of the coding on the second PDF. So that's a great question. No, so if you collapse them, it's just showing you what's in the nutrition code itself. So yeah, that's a good point. So if you wanted to keep everything in nutrition as well, yeah, you could do that. So then you would repeat the process for every article that you read. You would do your coding. Let's see if it's got anything about stunting in this particular article. Okay, so I think maybe this also had a definition, but that's okay. I'll just code this little bit about stunting here instead. So the idea is that once you've coded from a bunch of different places, you end up with this kind of like central place where you have all that information on that particular topic. So now if I wanted to write a paragraph or a section about stunting, all of that information is in one place. And here I've just coded two things from two different files, but as you can see with the sample project, you can code lots of different things to the same place. In terms of what else you can see in a code, so like I've opened up this stunting code, and probably often it's most helpful to look at it like this, where you can actually see what is the place that you've coded from and how many references have you coded there. But if you want to view it in a slightly different format, you've got a couple of tabs on the right hand side that you can access. So for example, you can click on the summary tab and you can see just at a glance like how many or where have you coded from. And if I go to my PDF tab, you can actually see in the PDF itself what have you coded. So sometimes this can be helpful if you just need to have a look back and see, yeah, where have you coded it from in that article. Another option is when you're looking at the article itself, you can turn on either coding stripes or highlighting to allow you to see what you've coded. So for example, if I was to go highlight and all coding, it'll highlight for me the parts that I've coded. So with this, it doesn't use different colors, but it'll just, anything that's coded anywhere, it'll highlight it. And this can just give you an idea of like how much of this article have you coded, which is obviously not very much at all. And the other thing with coding stripes, if you do want the additional information about like where have you coded things, you can turn on your coding stripes. So this will add stripes for different codes on the right-hand side. As you scroll down, you will see that they are color-coded, so you can actually see where have you coded that. So for example, if I coded this in more than one place, it would have multiple different colors for the stripes. So that can be a good way of, yeah, keeping track of what you have coded and where you have coded it to. In terms of other things you might do with the codes, so one thing is like maybe you just might want to rename the code. So for example, if I decide I want to rename this definition code, I could just right-click and say Code Properties. So for example, I might just change that to say definition of stunting. And again, I quite like to use color coding. It can be quite satisfying to change the colors of things. For example, when you finished writing about this topic, then you could change the color just to indicate to yourself that you've done that, and just as like a little satisfactory thing to do when you've finished using that information. So you can do that in those ways, or if you did just want to change the color, you can just go color, or if you did just want to rename it, you can just select it and then select again and you can rename. If you decide that you want to merge codes together, you can do that. So for example, if I have a change of heart and decide, actually, I want this information and this information to be together in the same code, that's easy to do. I would just cut it and right-click, and merge into the selected code. And you'll see now, previously, the stunting code had two things and the definition had one, and now they've combined together and this one code has three things. So once you do that, though, it's like a final, so we can't unseparate them again now, but it was easy to merge them. And similarly, if you decided that you wanted to make something a subcode of another code, you can absolutely do that. So for example, if I just made a new code here, maybe I will call this nutrient deficiencies. So for example, if this code is sitting by itself, but I decide later that actually I'd like it to be a subcode of nutrition, it's a similar process. I would just cut it and right click, and this time rather than merging it, I would paste it, and now it will sit as a subcode. So those are kind of the key things that I can think of in terms of ways that you might need to like reorganize your codes or delete things from your codes, or obviously actually code materials. If you have any questions about that, I'm really happy to take them. But otherwise, hope that I've kind of conveyed the main idea of like how you would code and why you might want to do that. And if it is something that you'd like to try, I'd encourage you just to kind of like get started. So see how you go with using NVivo, upload at least one article to it. As you read it, you can make annotations and memos if you like. And definitely I'd recommend try the coding and then, yeah, see how you go, see if it's helpful. No worries. Yeah, thanks for coming. And if I find out anything about the Kindle, I'll let you know, or actually vice versa, let me know if you do need any help. No worries. So yeah, thanks everyone. I hope that, yeah, it's given you some ideas. So great question. So no, I have not used Obsidian a lot, but my colleague Karen, who I'm guessing you've probably been to her workshop, she uses it a lot. And I would say Obsidian is a lot more powerful for like organizing your notes. But I like NVivo for organizing materials from different articles. So I think that you can absolutely use both of them for different purposes. Great question about the online workshop. So I should have included some links in my slides. I forgot to do that, but I can let you know. So there is a couple of workshops next week on using NVivo for qualitative analysis. So this is more like in-depth about if you had a research project like the kind of thing with the sample project, how would you go about doing that? I'll just I'll share with you the library workshops page and I can show you. Okay. So if you go to the Curtin Library Workshops page, so I'm currently in the digital skills section, but it doesn't have to be. Any of the library workshop pages, if you just search for NVivo, you'll see that there's a few different workshops coming up. So today's one obviously is what you're at now. This is more of a shorter one. Next week on Monday in person and then Thursday online, I will cover more concepts. So as part of that, I will talk about some visualizations. So not like anything hugely fancy, but just how to create like mind maps and things like that. And yeah, just how to work with different kinds of research materials. So for example, if you did have survey data or like interviews and things like that, how would you import those materials, and then what kind of things could you do with those materials, including searching them. And then on the 4th of September is one that focuses more specifically on using NVivo to help with the literature review. So some of that will be repeat of what we've done today, but also I'll talk about other ways that it can be helpful. So I hope that helps. And yeah, in terms of visualizations, I'll cover that in next week's session. If that's something you're interested in, though, again, you're welcome to send me an email and I can help you out with that. But yeah, I haven't done anything really fancy. It would be more things like mind maps and concept maps. Thanks, everyone. So I will stop sharing my screen now, and then just as a last slide, I will pop up the feedback slide in case anyone would like to give feedback on the session. And you always, yeah, any feedback is gratefully received. So if you would like to do that, oops, please do so. Oh, thanks very much. I appreciate it, everyone. And yeah, good luck using it if you do start to use it, and don't hesitate to get in touch if you have questions, and I will have a look about that text-to-speech in the YouTube comments because those are new things for me. Thanks all. Have a lovely evening.